Dorcas stood in front of the hotel mirror, gently adjusting the silk scarf that hid the thin scar on her left cheek. She barely recognized the woman staring back, a woman stronger than before, yet trembling with nerves. 3 years earlier, her family held a funeral for her and told everyone she had died in a tragic car accident. Now, she was alive and preparing to walk into her sister Sandra's wedding uninvited. "Breathe," she whispered, though her hands refused to steady. In less than an hour, she would face the man sitting in the front pew. Her father, Vincent Collins. Dorcas drew in a shaky breath and reminded herself, this isn't revenge. This was truth. Truth Sandra deserved to know. Before the world believed she died, Dorcas lived in a small Oregon town with her parents, Vincent and Gloria Collins, and her younger sister. Sandra had always been the obedient one, the daughter who never broke rules and made their parents proud. Dorcas, however, was the one who questioned everything, especially the strict beliefs that ruled the Collins household. "Just walk in, let her see you, then leave," she whispered, steadying her thoughts. At 25, Dorcas dreamed of a life far beyond their small-town boundaries. Those dreams grew the moment she met Simon Reed, a young hospital resident who worked long shifts but still found time to send her sweet, funny messages every day. He was kind, smart, and steady in a way she had never known before. But the night she brought Simon home for dinner, the air around the table grew sharp enough to cut. Vincent barely spoke, and Gloria moved dishes around as if Simon did not belong. When Simon left, the real explosion began. Vincent cornered Dorcas in the kitchen, his face tight with anger. "That boy isn't right for you," he growled, pointing toward the door Simon had walked through. Gloria folded her arms and shook her head. "Dorcas, sweetheart, he's not our kind." Heat rushed through Dorcas' chest. "Our kind," she repeated. "You mean decent, hard-working people don't fit your rules?" Vincent's jaw flexed. "Don't get clever with me. This family has standards." Every evening after that turned into interrogation, where she went, what she said, and whether she'd come to her senses. Sandra tried to stay neutral at first. She would whisper, "Simon seems nice. Maybe Dad will calm down," but their parents' pressure slowly changed her. Soon she avoided Simon altogether. The final breaking point came months later when Simon proposed. His ring was simple, beautiful, and filled with love. Dorcas gathered her family in the living room and lifted her hand. "We're getting married," she said softly. The newspaper slipped from Vincent's hands. Gloria froze mid-stitch. Sandra's eyes widened. Then Vincent stood and thundered, "Absolutely not. As long as you live under my roof, you follow my rules." Dorcas felt something break inside her as Vincent's voice echoed through the room. "You can't stop me," she whispered, but her father stepped closer, towering over her. "As long as you live under my roof, I decide your future." Gloria finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Dorcas, think about your life. Think about your children. Think about how this will look to everyone." Sandra stood from the couch, trying to help. "Maybe we should calm down," but Vincent slammed his hand on the table. "No more talking. He chooses now. Him or us." Silence fell heavy over the room. Dorcas looked at each of them, her father's fury, her mother's fear, Sandra's heartbreak. She swallowed hard. "I choose Simon," she said softly but firmly. Vincent's face darkened like a storm cloud. "Then you're no daughter of mine," he snapped. "Get out of this house. And don't come back." Dorcas blinked back tears, turned and walked upstairs. She packed a small suitcase with shaking hands, knowing life as she knew it was ending. When she stepped outside, Sandra ran after her, tears streaming down her face. Sandra grabbed her tightly. "Please don't go," she cried. "Dad might change his mind." Dorcas hugged her younger sister, breathing in the familiar lavender scent Sandra always wore. "No, he won't," she murmured. "But I will always love you, Sandy. Remember that." Sandra held her tighter, refusing to let go. "You're my sister. You're my best friend. This isn't fair." Dorcas wiped her tears. "It isn't. But I have to choose my own life." She got into her car, watched Sandra crumble on the driveway, then drove away with her heart breaking in pieces. For the next 6 months, Dorcas built a new life with Simon in a small Portland apartment. Mornings were filled with laughter, burnt toast, and Simon trying to teach her how to fold dumplings the way his grandmother taught him. Dorcas freelanced as a graphic designer, slowly gathering clients who loved her artistic eye. Simon worked long shifts at the hospital, often coming home exhausted but smiling just because she was there. "We'll have a simple courthouse wedding," Simon said one evening, kissing her forehead. Dorcas smiled back. It felt like happiness was finally hers to keep. Simon's parents flew in from California to meet her, and they welcomed Dorcas with warm hugs and too much food. His mother spent hours teaching her family recipes while showing embarrassing baby photos of Simon with chubby cheeks. It was everything Dorcas wished her own family would have been. But late at night, when the apartment grew quiet, she felt the ache of missing Sandra. Many times she picked up her phone to call her, only to freeze, remembering the last words her father said. Simon noticed her sadness and whispered, "Give them time, love. One day they'll come around." But time was not on Dorcas' side. One rainy October afternoon, she finished a client meeting and drove home, humming to the radio. Oregon rain fell hard, turning the roads slick and dangerous. She stopped at a red light and glanced at her phone, ready to text Simon about the new contract she had landed. Then she saw it, an enormous truck speeding toward her in the rearview mirror, unable to stop. She gasped. The impact came before she could even cry out, and the world around her shattered into darkness. Dorcas woke up 3 weeks later in a hospital bed, tubes in her arms and bandages wrapped along her left cheek. Her body felt stiff, heavy, and foreign. When she turned her head, she found Simon slumped in a chair beside her, his hand resting on hers. His face was pale, unshaven, and full of worry. When he opened his eyes and saw her awake, he broke into tears. Thank God you're here," he whispered. But as the doctors explained her injuries, Dorcas realized she was far from okay. Her leg was broken, her face scarred, her memory foggy. "Did you call my family?" she asked weakly one morning, her voice barely more than a whisper. Simon hesitated, his eyes dropping to the blanket. "I tried. I really tried." Dorcas frowned. "What did Dad say?" Simon swallowed. "He said you made your choice. He said you were dead to them." The words pierced her deeper than any wound on her body. "Dead?" she whispered, staring at the hospital ceiling as tears filled her eyes. Simon squeezed her hand gently. "I'm so sorry." Called again. "I begged them to listen. They hung up every time." Dorcas tried calling herself once she was strong enough to hold a phone. But the number had been disconnected. Her emails bounced back as undeliverable. It was as if her parents had erased every trace of her existence. Simon even drove to her childhood home, hoping for answers. But when he spoke to neighbors, they said Vincent and Gloria had instructed everyone never to give out information about the Collins family. Dorcas stared out the hospital window, feeling like she'd slipped out of her own life. "I guess I really am dead to them," she whispered through tears. 2 months later, still walking with a cane and healing from her scars, Dorcas received news that broke her all over again. Simon came home from work looking troubled. He sat beside her, taking her hands gently. "I ran into someone today," he said. "A nurse from your hometown. Her name is Jenny Palmer." Dorcas nodded slowly, remembering Jenny from high school. "What did she say?" Simon took a breath. "She offered me condolences. She said she was sorry for my loss." Dorcas froze. "Loss?" Simon nodded. "Your family held a funeral for you 2 months ago." Dorcas stared at Simon, unable to breathe. "A funeral?" she whispered. Simon nodded and handed her a folded newspaper clipping Jenny had given him. There, printed in bold letters, were the words, "Dorcas Collins, 25, remembered at memorial service." The article described her as a beloved daughter who died in a tragic accident. It spoke about her church work, her artistic talents, and how deeply her family mourned her. There was no mention of Simon, no mention of their life in Portland. It was as if the truth had been buried with her. But what hurt Dorcas the most was seeing Sandra's quote in the article. "My sister Dorcas was the best big sister anyone could ask for. I'll miss her every day for the rest of my life." Dorcas covered her mouth as sobs shook her entire body. Sandra, her sweet sister, truly believed she was gone. Her parents hadn't just cut her off, they'd let her sister grieve over an empty coffin. Simon held her as she cried into his chest. "They rewrote your life, Dorcas," he whispered. "They pretended you were someone else. Then pretended you were gone." Depression sank into Dorcas like heavy rain. She grieved not just for herself, but for Sandra, who was mourning a sister who still breathed. Dorcas wondered how she could ever return without breaking her sister's heart all over again. Simon tried everything to comfort her. Warm meals, gentle hugs, long midnight talks. "They don't deserve you," he whispered many nights. But the hurt was deep, and each day felt like walking through shadows. One afternoon, Dorcas whispered, "How could my own parents prefer a dead daughter over a daughter who disobeyed them?" Eventually, Dorcas and Simon decided it was time for a fresh start. Oregon held too much pain. They moved to Seattle, where Simon found a new position at a medical center, and Dorcas slowly rebuilt her graphic design business. She poured her emotions into her work, creating designs that spoke of survival and beauty rising from brokenness. They married in a small garden overlooking the water, surrounded by Simon's warm and welcoming family. His mother cried as she hugged Dorcas. "You're part of us now, dear," she said. For the first time in years, Dorcas felt wanted. Over time, life blossomed again. Dorcas and Simon bought a cozy craftsman home with a little garden where she planted roses, lavender, and marigolds, flowers that reminded her of childhood. On weekends, they explored Seattle's markets, parks, and mountain trails. Dorcas grew her business into a small design studio with several employees. Simon became an attending physician, busy but always present. And yet, despite all the joy, a quiet ache remained. A Dorcas-shaped shadow in Sandra's life, and a Sandra-shaped void in hers. She checked social media secretly, searching for signs of her sister's world. One late evening, while scrolling through Instagram under her new name, Dorcas Lake, she froze. A photo of Sandra appeared on the Explore page. Sandra was older now, her hair slightly longer, her smile gentler. She wore a simple engagement ring and stood beside a man named Marcus. The caption read, "He proposed on the beach. Said yes. I wish my sister Dorcas could be here. She would have loved him." Dorcas covered her face with both hands. Sandra still carried her memory, still loved her, still believed she was watching from heaven. Over the next few days, Dorcas fell into an unshakable obsession, scrolling through months of Sandra's posts. Sandra had become a teacher, just like she always dreamed. She posted photos of her classroom, her students, and moments with Marcus. But sprinkled between the joy were heartbreaking messages. 3 years without you. Christmas is never the same without my sister. I still set aside a slice of cake for you every birthday." Each post pulled Dorcas deeper into guilt and longing. "She thinks I'm dead," Dorcas whispered. "She's living with a grief that doesn't belong to her." Marcus seemed gentle and kind, the type of man Dorcas would have trusted with her sister's heart. He held Sandra's hand in every photo, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Dorcas studied every detail. His soft smile, the protective way he stood beside Sandra, the laughter in their pictures. "She's happy," Dorcas whispered. "But she's hurting too." When Sandra posted the wedding date, August 15th at St. Luke's Church, Dorcas felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment she had been avoiding for years. She finally whispered to herself, "I have to go." When Dorcas told Simon, he looked at her with worry in his eyes. "You want to go, in person?" She nodded slowly. "Sandra deserves the truth." Simon sat beside her and held her hands. "I understand why you want this. But think about the shock, the emotions, the risk. Your parents will be there too. Dorcas looked down at her wedding ring and whispered, It doesn't matter. I can't let my sister start her marriage believing her only sibling is dead. Simon exhaled deeply. If this is what you need for your peace, then I'll support you. But Dorcas shook her head gently. No, love. This is something I need to face alone. Simon frowned. Then at least let me drive you. She smiled weakly. If you come, I'll lean on you. And I need to be strong. On the morning of August 15th, Dorcas dressed in a navy blue gown, applied soft makeup to hide the scar, and placed her silk scarf neatly around her neck. She looked at herself in the hotel mirror and whispered, Sandra, I'm coming. With trembling hands, she grabbed her purse, stepped outside, and drove toward the church that once shaped her whole childhood. The town looked exactly the same. The same bakery on Main Street. The same bookstore with its faded blue awning. The same neighbors who once watched her grow up. Every corner felt like a memory she had tried so hard to bury. Dorcas parked 3 blocks away from St. Luke's Church and walked slowly toward the sound of ringing wedding bells. Guests in bright dresses and polished suits climbed the steps, laughing and chatting. She recognized old teachers, familiar neighbors, even childhood friends. They all think I'm gone, she whispered, her heart thudding painfully. Dorcas waited until the ceremony began before slipping quietly into the church. She took a seat in the very back pew, hiding behind a pillar. The church was full, flowers, music, sunlight pouring through colored windows. Then she saw them, her parents. Vincent Collins sat stiff in his suit, his hair now completely gray. Gloria Collins looked thinner, older, still wearing the same tight smile she used in church. Dorcas felt a tremor run through her, but she kept her eyes on the aisle, because that was where Sandra appeared. Sandra walked slowly down the aisle on Vincent's arm, wearing a lace gown that made her look like something out of a dream. Her bouquet of white roses matched the soft flowers in her hair. She smiled, radiating beauty and joy. But Dorcas saw it immediately. A shadow behind the smile. A wound. A missing piece. She feels the absence, Dorcas whispered. Sandra passed so close that Dorcas could smell her perfume, lavender vanilla, the same scent she wore in high school. Dorcas bit her lip to keep from calling out her name. The ceremony was beautiful. Marcus looked at Sandra with such devotion that Dorcas' heart softened. The priest spoke about unity and the blessing of love. When Sandra read her vows, she paused, tears shining in her eyes. Marcus, she said softly, you helped me heal from losses I thought would break me. I promise to love you with all my heart, including the part that still belongs to my sister Dorcas, who I know is watching from heaven. Dorcas pressed a hand to her mouth, holding in a sob that threatened to escape. When the ceremony ended, Dorcas slipped outside, her breath trembling. She followed the crowd to the reception hall but stayed hidden on the terrace, watching through tall glass windows. Sandra and Marcus danced their first dance under golden lights. Sandra rested her head on his chest, smiling softly, though her eyes still carried that shadow. Vincent danced with his daughter next, holding her tightly as if nothing had ever happened. Dorcas watched with tears rolling down her cheeks, whispering, She deserves the truth. She deserves her sister. As guests finished their meals, the microphone was passed around for speeches. Marcus' best man joked about late-night study sessions and shared embarrassing stories that made everyone laugh. Then Gloria stood up, clutching her napkin as if it were holding her together. Sandra has always been our shining light, she said with trembling pride. Dorcas watched from outside, her heart tightening at the sound of her mother's voice. Finally, Sandra rose for her own speech. This day is perfect, she began softly, but not complete. Someone important is missing. Sandra held her bouquet close. My sister Dorcas, she continued. She should be here. She should be hugging me right now. She should be dancing with me. She should be laughing at how nervous I was this morning. The room fell silent. Wherever you are, big sister, this is for you. Sandra raised her bouquet, preparing to toss it. At that moment, Dorcas felt something inside her snap, not in pain but in courage. She stepped through the open French doors and into the ballroom. The crowd gasped as the bride froze mid-throw, her eyes widening. The bouquet slipped from Sandra's fingers and fell to the floor. She whispered, "Dorcas!" The room turned as one, staring at the woman who was supposed to be buried beneath stone and earth. Dorcas stood still, her scarf gently brushing her cheek, tears glistening in her eyes. Gloria gasped. Vincent shot to his feet, knocking over his chair. His voice cracked as he pointed at Dorcas. "Why are you still alive?" The shock of his words rippled through the entire hall. A wave of whispers and gasps spread like wildfire. Sandra took a trembling step forward. "You're alive!" Her voice broke. Dorcas nodded, barely breathing before Sandra sprinted across the room and threw her arms around her. The sisters clung to each other, sobbing. "I thought I lost you," Sandra cried. Dorcas whispered, "I never wanted to leave you." Vincent stormed toward them, shouting, "Dorcas, get out. You have no right to be here." Aunt Rebecca stood up sharply. "Vincent, stop. Look at what you've done." But he ignored her, rage consuming him as years of buried truth cracked open. Sandra turned on her father with the fury of someone betrayed too deeply. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Why did you say she was dead?" Gloria shook, unable to speak. Vincent opened his mouth, but no words came. Dorcas stepped forward, her voice steady. "They held a funeral for me, while I was in a hospital bed fighting for my life." The crowd gasped again. Vincent sputtered, "You were dead to us the day you chose him." Sandra stared in disbelief. "So you lied to me? For 3 years?" Gloria covered her face and sobbed. Guests began standing up, shaking their heads, some whispering their disgust. Marcus wrapped an arm around Sandra as she trembled with rage. "I cried at her grave," Sandra said through clenched teeth. "Every month I brought flowers. I begged God to take care of her soul. And you," she pointed at her parents, "you watched me suffer." Dorcas whispered, "Sandra, I'm so sorry." Sandra grabbed her hand. "No, you didn't do this. They did." Vincent tried to speak, but Sandra raised her hand sharply. "Enough." With the authority of a teacher and the heartbreak of a sister, Sandra said, "Mom, leave." Gloria gasped, "Sandra, please." But Sandra shook her head, tears pouring down her cheeks. "You don't get to stand in this room after what you've done. You don't get to pretend we're a family." Vincent's face flushed with anger. "This is my daughter's wedding." Sandra glared at him. "No, Dad. It's my wedding. And you lost the right to be here the day you buried your own child while she was still alive." Vincent and Gloria were led out of the ballroom by relatives, leaving behind a stunned silence. Sandra collapsed into a chair, shaking. Dorcas knelt beside her. "I never wanted this to happen today." Sandra cupped her sister's face. "You being alive is the best gift I could ever get." Marcus joined them, placing a hand on Dorcas' shoulder. "We'll figure this out together." Slowly, the guests returned to their seats, unsure how to continue a celebration that had turned into a revelation. But Sandra stood up, taking the microphone again. "I know today took a sharp turn," Sandra said shakily. "But love is still here. My sister is alive. And that is a miracle." The guests clapped softly at first, then louder, embracing the moment rather than the tragedy. Marcus pulled Sandra into a comforting embrace, and Dorcas felt something warm bloom inside her, a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. Later that night, Sandra and Dorcas sat together on the terrace, talking quietly. "We lost 3 years," Sandra whispered. "But we won't lose another minute." In the months that followed, Sandra and Dorcas rebuilt their bond piece by piece. They visited each other often, laughed over old memories, and cried over the time stolen from them. Their parents never reached out again. Not with real apologies, anyway. But Dorcas no longer carried the weight of their choices. She had Simon, who stood beside her with love and strength. She had Sandra, who cherished her fiercely. And she had a new truth. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shares your heart. Dorcas finally chose herself, and for the first time she felt truly alive.